I've gone and bought the ugliest EV that's on the market, but it's also the best value. And let me show you a few things that I like about this and some of the things that I don't like about it. Hopefully that sun will just go behind those trees. Well, let's start off with the colour. I really like it. Tri-coat metallic, it's a lovely deep colour, it's a nice tone, love it. I don't like those wheels, they can just go in the bin. They make the car look 10 or 15 years older than it actually is. I like roof rails for practical family things, get the bike racks on there, get the load box on there. Apart from MG, it decided that they hadn't done the proper testing, and so these just became for decorative purposes only. But then once again they changed their minds and they said, oh, you can put 50 kilos on there, maybe 75. Who really knows definitively what they're for? I don't like this big plasticky grille. Yeah, it's a bit of an old Passat sort of thing. It makes it look very dated. And add to that, this cheap charge flap, no light in there, and it's just, not great. I like that someone's added tinted windows, very practical for the family. I said to the kids that these were limo tints. My wife said they're drug dealer tints. I like that someone's added some mud flaps. Once again, very nice and practical. Let me know if this is an optional extra fitted afterwards or if these came standard. I like that it's got a decent sized boot. It's not the biggest, but it's very usable. I like that it's got the same wheel fitment as VW and Mercedes, so I can use one of the space savers I already had in the garage. I don't like this fake leather. It doesn't feel great. Maybe it looks like it'll be hard wearing. Maybe it's great for families. I like the centre headrest though, and it's good to see headrests with a bit of squidge, not too firm. Overall, the seats are comfortable. They've got just the right amount of give and padding, so they're supportive, but not really hard, like quite a lot of the other EVs we test drove. I also like that it's got 4 USB ports, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. Keep the whole family happy. I don't like the fact that the seat is set so high. I'm only 5'11", and this is right at my eye line. I have no idea how the camera's gonna represent that, but this visor is pretty much useless most of the time because I need the extra height. The seat is maybe jacked up because of the fitment of the battery pack. But what I do like is VW have basically shared their parts bin with MG for this car. If you're not aware, SAIC, who produce MGs for various markets around the world, they also have many other companies, but one of the ventures they have had for the last 40 years is a joint venture with VW. So any Golf, Passat, Bora, Jetta that's been sold in China and built there for the last 40 years has been built by SAIC, and it's clear for me to see why. As someone who's driven a few, this mirror's straight from a Passat, so are these visors, so is this steering wheel, so are all the stalks. Visually they look a bit different, but they're the same feel, they've got the same weight to them, they all work in the same way, and it's the same story over here. The lock buttons on the door, the window switches, it all feels very German, it all feels very VW. And in fact, when you look at these tactile switches here and these rotary knobs and the weight of the buttons and stuff, it doesn't feel cheap of a vehicle this sort of age. This is very much a VW electric handbrake thing. It's very much the weight of stuff. It feels more like an Audi than something that is really this sort of price point. It's not the kind of wibbly wobbly feel that you get in some Renaults and Peugeots and some of that stuff. It's all very like reassuring and positive feeling. That is good. I like that you can buy one of these with 30,000 miles on it, 3 years old, full of service history, so it should have remaining 4 years of manufacturer warranty, and all we paid for it was 8.5 grand. Absolute bargain. You could pay twice the money and not get much more car. I like the fact that it has Android Auto, which works flawlessly, and when you go into Android Auto, it does use the full size of the screen. It's not the biggest screen in the world, but at least it doesn't only use partial amounts of the screen, just like you see in some Mercedes and some Kias, to name just a few. Heated seats work okay, on and off. What more do you need? No messing around with multiple levels or anything like that. It's just simple and it just works. Whoever signed off on this whole arrangement here needs to be fired. I mean, these just look a mess. This badge isn't even straight on this particular one. That's going to be resolved. And this black bar here, I mean, talk about just making this a mess. I presume this is because of licensing plates in other parts of the world. Maybe in China they have bigger square ones. But there are things you can do about this instead of having this big bar on here. I'm going to resolve that on my channel for sure. Resolve this stuff, resolve the wheels. Probably won't be a half bad looking car once those terrible things are sorted. It must be time to do some driving and tell you all about that. So driving the MG5, how would I characterize it? How would I describe it? I probably think there's just one word. It's pleasant. If you like the word pleasant, you'll probably like the MG5. If you're not such a fan of words like pleasant and nice, maybe the MG5 isn't what you're looking for. It's kind of a tale of two halves, to be honest. With its big sidewall tyres and its very soft springs, around town it's a joy to drive. It soaks up the slow potholes and undulations of low speed stuff. Anything up to 30 miles an hour, it is beautiful to drive, and it is on par with something like a Mercedes S-Class with very sophisticated, expensive air suspension and proper quality dampening. Things kind of unravel a little bit as you go a bit faster, as you increase the pace and you start getting to 40 to 50 to 60 to 70 miles an hour. You can tell that it's got very cheap shock absorbers on the car. And the problem with softly sprung cars is that there's a lot more dampening that needs to happen from the shock absorbers. So normally what cheap cars are manufactured and engineered to do is they put very hard springs on it because you kind of need less like dampening control and expensive shock absorbers. So they kind of have cheapskated out on the shock absorbers on this car, and that's quite apparent to me. But that doesn't massively detract from it. It's still a very comfortable vehicle to drive at any speed, and all these things are relative. In fact, it's kind of the opposite of driving a Tesla, whereas a Tesla Model 3 and a Tesla Model Y, they're very busy around town. They don't have enough sidewall on the tyres, they don't have soft enough springs, the spring rate is very hard, and the dampeners, they seem okay, but at low speed, they just can't do the job. At higher speeds, Tesla manners are very good. They're very good for motorway cruising, nice and comfortable. The suspension does a good job. Now, what do I think about the steering? Well, there's 3 different modes, and if I go between eco and normal and sport, I get different weight on the steering. Now, the steering does feel kind of artificial. It's not communicative or giving you masses of feedback, but it is precise, it is controlled, it goes where you're pointing it to go. So there's nothing really to complain about. And in this type of car, you don't expect it to be a Porsche Taycan. It's not a Model 3 performance. That said, it has a bit of body roll, but despite the body roll, it does grip very well. The handling actually is better than you would imagine. You'd look at the squishy sidewall tyres and you'd look at the rest of the character of the vehicle and you'd think that is going to be very wallow in the corners. But actually it's not bad at all. There must be some stiff anti-roll bars or something that's helping just keep things on track. Now, in terms of performance, it's more than adequate in whichever mode you put it in. The figures on paper are very misleading. That's always the case with every EV, and lots of the EVs that I've driven have felt a lot more powerful than their petrol or diesel counterparts, but this one particularly so. It's on paper, it says 150 horsepower, but you could drive a 200 horsepower petrol car and this would still feel quicker at pretty much all speeds. And it's not just the responsiveness of the throttle, it's the all-round drivability of it. In fact, the one thing I like about this is that the throttle is fairly long. It's well calibrated to help you drive smoothly. So it's got a very linear rate as you depress on the accelerator. It's not an on-off switch, as is the case of quite a few modern cars. You have to be very light-footed and very sensitive. but especially for some modern EVs. Let's not mention any names. But this one in particular is very smooth. The accelerator pedal is very linear, and it just helps you drive smoothly. It is a very relaxing car. In terms of the seating position on the seat, well, I've said that I find it a little bit high. It's better for my wife, both because she's a bit shorter than me and because she prefers to sit a bit higher. I prefer to sit a bit lower. But otherwise, the steering wheel's centered, the pedals are centered, it's all where you want it to be. And if you want to nip out of traffic in front of the roundabout, then the inside wheel does scrabble a little bit, and there's not much that you can help when you've only got 205 section tyres, putting down so much torque from the electric motor. What else do I think? In terms of the noise, it isn't a quiet car. That being said, for its price point, I think it's completely adequate. It's completely fine. And actually, for vehicles of this price point, internal combustion engine or electric, I think the sound deadening is fine. It's not a particularly noisy car. That being said, it depends what your frame of reference is. If you are coming from an Audi A8 or a super luxurious BMW 7 Series, or you drive a Rolls Royce, then of course the MG5 is going to be a bit noisy to you. On the other hand, if you're coming from a VW Golf, a VW Passat, an Audi A4, a Skoda Superb, a Skoda Octavia, you are really going to feel at home. Not just because all of the controls are the same, but because it has some of those same front-wheel drive VW Group driving characteristics, and in fact it's probably similar noise levels to some of those, you know, mid-range VAG, you know, VW Audi Group cars, and it's just pleasant. Let's come back to that word of pleasant. So I've told you about the suspension, I've told you about the power and the engine. Of course, it's got 3 modes. The 3 modes do affect the level of regen. You jump in it and it always defaults to the middle one, to position 2. You can increase it to 3, but you won't get full one pedal driving. Almost. If you adapt yourself, you can almost drive it on one pedal, but you will eventually have to tap the brakes. It won't bring you to a complete standstill. Number 1 is very good coasting mode, very smooth and easy for faster driving like on a motorway. Visibility I find excellent all round. It's got a good view out of the rear for a modern car. It's got big mirrors for this type of car. I think exceptionally large mirrors for this type of car. View, blind spots is absolutely excellent, to be honest. Can't fault it. So that's my summary of driving the MG5, if you can even still see me. Who knows? It's got quite dark, but overall it's a very satisfying, pleasant place to be to soak up miles. It's not a sports car, it doesn't pretend to be a sports car. It's a very comfortable place to soak up the miles, and whether that be slow speed or fast speed, you're not going to be disappointed in the driving experience. If anything, I think most people will come into the MG5 with very low expectations, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. It will ride better than you expect, it will be faster than you expect, it will corner better than you expect. And the seats, I find them the right level of soft but also supportive. Not too soft, not too hard, they're just right. And in fact, I think the level of comfort from this vehicle is a combination of just enough give in the seats, combine that with the soft springs, and then the big sidewalls on the tyre gives you that 3 layers of suspension, soaking up all the bumps. I've just been on that last section of road. It's absolutely terrible, and any vehicle you drive down there, it's throwing you all over the place, it's up and down, you feel like you're off-roading. But this is one of the very few vehicles, this and my old Mercedes S-Class, that just glide over all of those imperfections in the road, no problem at all. So I'm impressed, my wife loves driving it. My wife's summary, I asked her after she'd had her first drive without me and she'd gone off with the kids and stuff, and her summary was, it's easy to drive, it's great, it's peaceful, it's responsive enough, It's nice and relaxing. And so, yeah, she said it was easy to drive, which is definitely singing the high praises of the MG5. So that's going to wrap up my first little installment of my video on the MG5. In my next video, I'm going to be talking a little bit to you about how we ended up with it. You know, we were on the fence about several other EVs and why we ultimately went for this. And I want to go into detail about a few other things, some of the specs, some of the data that I've already been collecting on the range and the efficiency. And there'll be lots more content coming as I bin off these ugly looking wheels, sort out the number plate on the back. I'm sure there'll be a few other surprises along the way. So thank you for joining me. If you've enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up, and maybe you want to subscribe if you want to watch some more content like this in the future. If you didn't like this, then leave me a comment and tell me why you didn't like it so that I can improve for the future. Either way, thanks for watching. Goodbye.